Here are the things you need to know about the Oza Zambia Independence Diamond Jubilee 26th October. This event is officially the National Zambian Independence event. So, we encourage you to fly into Reagan Airport. Reagan Airport is 15 minutes away from the venue and 2 minutes away from the hotel where rooms are reserved. If you need accommodation, we have a special for $177 for king rooms and $204 for 2 queen-size bedrooms. If you need to share a room with someone, let us know on 6788516601. Then comes the meet and greet, Friday, October 25th at 6 p.m. We will have the Zambian night event, Come in African attire or Zambian colors. We're playing Zambian music and serving Zambian cuisine. Venue to be advised. And that's not all. On 26th October, we have the men dinner event from 7 p.m. at Hyatt Regents Crystal City at Reagan National Airport, 2799 Richmond Highway, Arlington, VA 22202. Tickets are $150 until October. You can buy your tickets by Zelle to 3529887049. Oza number. After you send your Zelle, you can WhatsApp 6788586601 to give your name and email. What are you waiting for? Get your ticket now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. It is August 31st, and it's the last day of the month, and we do appreciate you tuning in and joining us for this exciting discussion. Do let a friend know that ZBTR is on and it is live, and tag a friend, and we are having a political conversation. I know everybody likes political conversations. And let everybody know that ZBTR is on. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and X, what used to be Twitter a few years ago before they changed the name. That's our social media tag there at ZBTR TV. So it's exciting. You saw me play that advert about the upcoming Oza Independence in DMV, those of us that live in the United States. Do join us. It's going to be an exciting time, and Zambia is getting ready to celebrate its Diamond Jubilee Independence, 60 years, 60 years. All right. Today, we are speaking to one of our legislatures or political leaders in Zambia. As you all may remember, 3 years ago, in August 2021, the Zambians went to the poll and overwhelmingly elected President Hakainde Hichilema and his party to take the reins of power in Zambia. And it's been 3 years. So today we thought that we should talk about that and find out how this party has done and performed. Joining us is Honorable Miriam Chonya. She is the Member of Parliament for Kafue constituency, which is just like, if I can remember, my drive from Lusaka is about 20-25 minutes, Honorable Chonya.
Yes, depending on one's driving speed. It takes me an hour now.
An hour, why?
With the traffic, and I suppose I drive like a lady.
No, I've heard about that crazy traffic in Zambia.
Yeah.
It's supposed to take you an hour to Kafue. I remember 25-30 minutes.
I'm sure those were good old days.
With my small Honda Civic. How are you? Welcome to ZBTR.
No, thank you so much. I'm fine, thank you. How is you and your team?
Everybody is doing good. We are excited. We always are excited to have our political leaders show up here, especially from UPND. Why UPND don't want to come on this show? I don't know why. Maybe. No, they don't. I'm telling you. I've reached out to your ministers. They are all okay. Let's leave that aside and start the conversation.
Okay, no, the pleasure is mine to be here. Yeah, of course, in your remarks, you said we are here for a political discussion. And I was like, oh, I thought we were here for a developmental discussion, but maybe it's the same thing.
It's all encompassed in all that. We're going to talk about. We're going to start with your constituency, as a matter of fact, before we talk about your party's performance as government, forming government. Kafue is quite vast, your constituency. Now, we're talking about the constituency, not the town, Kafue.
Yes.
You're surrounded by Chirundu, Chiranga, Chongwe, Luangwa, and I believe so. Tell us, since you want to speak development, let's start from there. What is the major economic activity in Kafue constituency, and tell us also what's the population of Kafue constituency?
Okay, thank you so much once again for having me. As you rightly put it, Kafue is quite vast. We have 18 wards making up Kafue.
Wow.
Of which 5 are urban, so to say, around the CBD of Kafue, and then the rest predominantly rural.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what it is. So you're asking about the population in general. Also, according to the last census of 2022, the count now is around 219,000. People.
In Kafue, 219,000.
Yes, yes, and of which about 50% is female, another 50 male. Like that. And then economically, you said
what are the major economic activities there? Is back to life?
So, of course, with a large portion of our constituency being rural, you can expect that agriculture is quite a mainstay activity, so to say. But we also have, a little bit of industrial activity, mainly, around the production at NCZ, our fertilizer producing company. And now we also have, this steel plant, which of course is privately owned.
That's good.
Yeah, the Kafue steel plant, or universal mining. Others know it as universal mining. Yeah. Other than that, we have also, the smaller industries list, who have been producing, bread and some. Is it ethanol? We have Alliance Ginneries who have also gone into, production of, products like cooking oil, apart from the cotton ginning. So, yeah, really, in terms of industrial activity, I would say that Kafue at the moment is yearning to go back to what it was in the 1990s, before the issues of privatization came in, where really I think we were a small industrial hub, that time producing the best chitenge from our KTZ.
Is that factory, what's the state of Kafue? What used to be Kafue
Textiles now? Of course, it had been bought off by some private investor, but who didn't really continue with production after the purchase. what they did was just to, I think, remove the assets and took them somewhere else, so that we now just have, some sheds that have remained and currently being used, for storage of maize by the FRA. And that, the opening of Kafue textiles, Mungush textiles, what is happening in Kafue now? It has ignited, the desire of the people of Kafue also equally to see, their KTZ come back, to life.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, that is, what is happening. But of course, with a lot of unemployment because of those limited
job opportunities.
Job opportunities from the manufacturing sector side.
Let's talk about the pressing issues in your constituencies. And I believe you did mention to me that this is your second term now as member of parliament. So what have been the pressing issues in your constituency and how have you addressed them?
Okay, so the pressing issue is what I was almost already going into, the aspect of, limited job opportunities.
Yes.
That seems to be top of our, pressing issues, because, like I alluded to earlier, we only have these few limited companies offering some jobs, to our people locally. The NCZ that I have talked about, currently, employs, I'm not sure now. I need to check whether they have even reached the 1,000 mark in terms of job opportunities. Because the last time I had the statistics, they were around 800, and that 800 was about less than half of what the company used to employ at its peak. So it means that apart from some companies phasing out completely, the remaining ones, shrunk in terms of the number of jobs, they've been able to create. And then the other privately owned one, are also, I think they're not talking more than 500, employees, at the company. So now against this population of 219, you can understand,
that's basically a drop in the ocean.
Yes.
On the civil service part of it, can you tell us how many schools are in the Kafue constituency, councils?
Wow. In terms of schools, we could be talking around 50 or so. I should have refreshed on that one. I don't seem to have it on my fingertips now, but of course, we had the figure when we were looking at addressing the desk, deficit. Now, as you know, there's been pronouncement of free education, and the president has given direction, in terms of not having a child sit on the floor, and we looked at, what our desk requirements were. At the time, we were around 13,000 in terms of that deficit. And now we are progressively, trying to address that.
Okay.
So that is when I had, that figure, which I can't now clearly remember in terms of number of schools, but clinics and health posts, we are talking around 24 in the district.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's been your party UPND prides itself on increasing the amount of CDF.
Yes.
So there's a lot of accusations of mishandling and even issues of CDF, to the extent of some people in some constituencies saying, only members of the party are benefiting from CDF. How are CDF work in your constituency?
Okay. Yes, of course, we do pride ourselves as a government that we have enhanced the CDF. I mean, you agree with me that shooting from 1.6 to 25.7 in 2022 was quite a substantial, increase in the amount. And of course, it continues, to increase. I'm sure you followed that from 25, we went to 28, we now stand at 30. And there are already indications that in the next budget in 2025, we are going to even go beyond this 30. We don't know what it's going to be. So this is, I think, a record that anyone would be proud about. Personally, I'm proud to be associated with this development in the CDF.
Okay.
Yes, I did talk to you about having run my first term, which was under, the different regime where we had, in fact, 1.4 at the start.
Okay.
Of CDF, and that 1.4, was received, in installments of a 700, and then some 2 years pass, you receive another 700. So as an MP, and people have all these expectations, and they think you are not doing enough as MP. But basically, it's because the tools were not there. But now with 28, with 30, we are talking about construction of classroom blocks, hospitals, rather health facilities, bridges. So how would you say that this is only benefiting members of the ruling party? Because these are community projects. The largest chunk of the CDF, as you may be aware, is money is earmarked for community projects, which are of common benefit to members of the community. Okay. So the smaller part of it is what goes towards, empowerment. Empowerment through loans and grants.
Okay. Can you
and
give
so
us...
maybe that is where your question
exactly
is based on the loans.
Can you give us on the loans and empowerment? How many people benefited, and what projects have they done? Yes.
So in our case, in Kafue, the empowerment itself is also in 2 or 3 categories, if you like. We've talked about the loans, we've talked about the grants, and we're also talking about the skills empowerment, where our youths are having to now apply to different skills colleges, and they are being skilled in various fields. So since 2022, from the time we had our first, we are now, talking about having sent well over 1,000 youths, cumulatively undergo training to acquire various, skills in carpentry, fabrication, hospitality. And we have offered these opportunities. As far as we are concerned, as Kafue, we've availed these opportunities on a competitive, equitable basis to whoever has applied, without even looking at party affiliation, because where we sit as a CDF committee, and even the forms, the application forms, when they come, they do not identify with any party affiliation of an applicant. So we give them on, the basis of merit. And so in our case, that concern does not arise. And this applies also to the issue of grants, and loans, because people do apply, and they do these applications, by the way, through the ward development committees. These are the lower level decentralized structures, through which these processes start. And we receive submissions and recommendations from these, in our case, the 18 ward development committees. So
Okay.
by the time we receive this information and it's on our table as the, the committee, responsible, we would not know what is coming from where and who has submitted what. And so for us, we'll only be talking to the documents and awarding, according to what we think deserves,
Okay.
to be awarded.
Okay.
Mm.
I have 100 questions for you, but obviously we can't.
Exhaust them.
we can't
I'll be brief.
we can't exhaust all the 100 questions in the. Let's go to national level, since you are
Okay.
a member of
Mm.
parliament in Kafue under the ruling party, and
Mm.
we are trying to look at how the party has performed in government in the past 3 years. One of the key or major issues that has contributed to the hardships of what is going on in the country right now is the frequency in the change of fuel prices by the Energy Regulation Board, ERB, has had effects, economic effects on the. How does government intend to resolve this issue? Okay, without making reference to the previous government's faults or failures. Let's
Mm-hmm.
let's just address what UPND intends to do with the energy crisis in the country.
Okay. Yeah, so definitely, the energy situation is something of concern, to all of us. And indeed, our government is trying, its best to, to deal with the situation.
Okay.
First of all, I think it must be appreciated that the change in the fuel pricing is not something of government's own making. I'm sure you and I, as well as those that are leading us, would want stability, in that area. But as you know, the issue of fuel pricing is really determined by the fundamentals at the global level. And so, being in our position, we are at the receiving end, of these issues that are happening, and we have no, choice but to try and also, adapt to the situation, if you like, so that we remain afloat. I happen to be actually a member of the Committee on Energy at
No.
Parliament.
Mm-hmm.
And recently we undertook a study, to on the same phenomenon of fuel pricing and the monthly, price review issue. And we undertook even some learning visits to neighboring countries. We talked to stakeholders in the industry. I'll tell you that the general recommendation, that came, and even from learning from Namibia, for instance, where we had gone, the thinking of the stakeholders was that it was advisable for government to even maintain these monthly, price adjustments. Because if they didn't, and then the performance of our kwacha against, the dollar continued, in that manner, then it means that government would take the burden if we had to, you know, if we had to maintain these prices by not responding to the fluctuations, at the international level. It would have meant government coming in to subsidize in a way, to absorb, those shocks, so to say.
So,
And so,
why can't government do that, subsidize?
I'm sure that it's something that they would be thinking about. I really wouldn't want now to be the government spokesperson on that particular aspect. But what I appreciate, when they also, got on this journey of trying to, put this cost to the consumer and the removal of subsidies. This has helped us to have some monies which ordinarily would have gone into subsidies, but have the money that we have been able now to apply to different sectors of the economy. We were just talking about the increased CDF.
Yeah.
I don't know what it would mean if we were to go back, to subsidies. And you heard and you are aware about the many advantages that have come, with the increased CDF. So I can understand that government is in a difficult situation where now if they had to make a choice between doing away with putting up all this infrastructure, providing the monies for our decentralized program versus, cushioning the costs of fuel, and we go back. So I do understand. I can understand their dilemma, in that regard. But I'm sure that it's a conversation.
Let me cut you short there. You realize that the fluctuation in the fuel price affects a lot of things. It affects a lot of things.
Yes.
It will increase the price of services. The people's salaries, those who are working or those who are doing to a small little business to make a living to feed their families, will be affected. A farmer transporting vegetables from wherever they are coming from to bring to Soweto market for those ladies to buy, everything will be affected, but the income of the people doesn't change. That's where the problem is, Honorable Chonya.
Yeah. No, I do. I appreciate that, and like I was saying, the complexity of trying to balance off, all these things, so that one area is not overly advantaged or disadvantaged over, another. I mean, there are people, for instance, who have argued in our other informal chats. We remember we were saying this free education, did it come too early without much thought about, the impact? Because how are we going to sustain, the teaching fraternity, and the attendance allowances that they are supposed to have? But you see, the thinking also in that regard is that between having some children missing out of school, completely, and having, and continuing with a few, because we don't want to make this education free, because we want to maintain the subsidies. Which one is a better devil? In my case, I would rather as an educationist for that matter, I would rather have many children, coming on board to receive some education, which is essentially, a basic human right.
In a crowded classroom, that's the okay. Let me tell you this. Next week, I'm speaking to what is categorized as a volunteer teacher. He has a lot to say about what's going on in the school. So you are saying you would prefer a child goes to school and gets some sort of education
than no school at all.
In a crowded, so you don't mind kids sitting in a small class, 90 of them?
Not that I don't mind, but I'm saying that the better devil between a crowded classroom and a child who is completely out of school. I would rather, we endure that crowded classroom for a few years, because with the CDF, again, for instance, in Kafue, we are constructing additional classrooms. So we know that in a matter of time, these congested classrooms will no longer be there. That particular problem will be addressed. So instead of losing out a child to remain outside the classroom until such a time that we have all the infrastructure, for me, I think I would not agree with that. In any case, what that has helped us to do also, since we did not seem in the past to use our statistics of how many children were in school, how many were out against versus the education infrastructure, we didn't know. It was the pronouncement of free education that actually showed us the crisis also of how many children are out of school and were actually hungry for education, and who came up, because now a declaration, the true operationalization of the free education had actually come into being.
Okay.
So
I want you to speak to some of the teachers have reached out and they are saying they reported to their post where they were sent. The station wasn't ready for them to receive them. No accommodation. There's children and the classroom, and the teacher is just standing there. No materials to help or support. Was this hastily done without much thought, or what is going on there, Honorable Chonya?
No. Well, the accommodation problem, yes, it's a real one, for our teachers, I agree. But also generally, you should appreciate that, again, as a country, we have a deficit in terms of, housing. And so this challenge is not only for the teachers, but, for other, people as well. Health personnel, I'm sure, are also in the same situation, but it's mostly felt especially by these two sectors, because these are the ones, you find a school and a health center in the remotest parts of this country. And indeed, when they go there, yes, they will experience, this challenge of accommodation. But you see, one way in which government is trying to address that is by emphasizing this aspect of decentralization, even in the recruitment of these staff, these essential staff in these, institutions. The recruitment has been decentralized to happen at a district level, so that if we have a teacher, giving an example of my constituency in Chiawa, who has been trained, and by the way, they were on the street all these years when there was an employment freeze in the past. And the new Dawn government comes in and says, let's employ the teachers in a decentralized manner. So a teacher that is employed in Chiawa and deployed within, the same area, I mean, employed in Kafue district and deployed within Chiawa, will not have difficulties operating in that environment. In fact, they'll come from their home, wherever they are living, to go and render a service to a school and go back to home in the environment that they are already familiar with. So the issues of accommodation in that case would not be as pressing as in a situation where we have, some of our people coming from Lusaka, for instance, they'll want to be, they'll find a way of being employed somehow in Kafue because they know in Lusaka schools are full. So they come and look for an employment opportunity in Kafue and they are now sent to Chiawa. It becomes a strange, difficult environment for them and they'll cry the loudest about accommodation. In fact, the unfortunate situation is where they just use, Kafue district as a pay point, and as soon as they are deployed, they begin to find all manner of excuses to find themselves back in Lusaka, where 10 teachers will be teaching one child, if you know what I mean. When their services would have been required in Chiawa, where, there these 100 pupils would be receiving,
I
services
understand.
from one teacher.
Maybe they may not want to go to Chihuahua because there's nothing there except a block of a classroom block. Okay. In the interest of time, let's move on. Let's talk about this corruption thing, which the president made himself a champion of fighting corruption. Okay. The president made a statement to the effect that law enforcement responsible will investigate those from the previous government and even those currently serving. Okay. However, we haven't seen any progressive investigations on Kakubo, Masebo, Gilbert Iswaniso, and Frank Tayali. Masebo was transferred, Kakubo resigned, and something. So we haven't seen anything on the people serving in the current government being investigated for corrupt activities. What is going on there?
I don't think I would be in a position to say what's going on there because I may not be privy, to the issues around those individuals you are talking about, and also what might be happening in the background. I wouldn't know. But all I would say, in that regard is that, yes, indeed, the president has made himself a champion, as you have put it, and he continues to champion the anti-corruption drive, which for me is a good thing.
Yes, everybody wants corruption to be fought.
Yes.
But it appears it's only leaning. You see, the statement he made was those from the previous government, even serving now, will be
He's very clear on that. He's very clear on that.
My argument is we haven't seen anyone in the current government being investigated. Maybe you can tell me one about.
Maybe you are yet to see. Maybe you are yet to see. Like I was saying, we wouldn't know what is happening in the background. But what I wanted to say was that for me, sending a very strong message against corruption itself is a good thing. It shows a strong political will to deal with the scourge. Unlike keeping quiet, about it. It wouldn't show that we appreciate that corruption is a cancer to our developmental aspirations, as a country. The statement in itself, should even help to deter anybody who would even want to think along, those lines. It sends a strong message by which, people are expected to conduct, themselves. So apart from being a deterrent, I would want to believe, that if anybody, is found wanting, whether from the previous government or even in this previous government, surely some kind of punitive, action should be able to be taken. And I would want to believe, the president on his word, and that he means, what he says, because I find him to be, a man of his words for many of the things that we have seen happening, whether, be it around the issues of the economy, social development, and all these things at the end of the day, by the way, require resources, which corruption would take away from if it was left to flourish unchecked. So if we need, to marshal, the resources that otherwise would be going to individuals' corrupt, pockets, then we can as well forget about, our developmental, agenda. So I want to believe that, if there is any corruption that is going on, certainly, one day somebody will be caught up with. Because if you look at even the changes recently that the president has, some steps and efforts, that have been made at reorganizing the Anti-Corruption Commission. For me, those are signals that his administration, our administration, is willing, to deal with the scourge. Only that, as they say, corruption can be very complicated, but still it can be dealt with. That is why we have these institutional and legal frameworks actually to deal with it.
Here's another matter, Honorable Chonya.
Yes.
The impression it gave when Minister Masebo was transferred was that something happened and she had to be moved from health to another ministry. Why wasn't she just fired? Or if nothing happened, why wasn't she just left where she was? Why wasn't she just fired?
That's a difficult question. That's a difficult question for me to answer.
If nothing happened, why was she transferred?
Because, of course, something happened there. I'm sure the minister herself, I think, was on the floor shortly before she was moved from the ministry. She was on the floor to talk about some mismanagement that had happened somewhere, I think, with the, those containers of drugs and all that.
Under her watch.
So under her watch. And sometimes, when you are in leadership, it doesn't necessarily mean that everything will be under your watch. Of course, there are certain things that should not escape your watch. But if they do, sometimes you suffer the consequences because you happen to be the person at the helm who would have been expected to maybe prevent, and not necessarily that you took part in whatever mishandling would have happened. So maybe on account, of that perceived oversight, so to say, it would then make, trigger, these movements. Because, I mean, why are transfers done? So perhaps you are transferred, to have a fresh look and a fresh start elsewhere. For me, it's a normal thing. It's a normal thing. These transfers do happen. But the issue of firing, I'm sure that if she had done, if anything was attributed to her, that would have deserved her to be fired. I'm sure that, His Excellency would not have held back, that prerogative. But, personally, because you are singling out, Honorable Masebo, for me, I find her to be a very, committed, dedicated woman, towards, her work.
Okay.
And she's one person who has, amassed so much experience and knowledge, in the way that, these government systems run. And I don't think that, firing her would have really been the best, for something that, maybe somebody else could have done. But really, maybe I'm not very competent again
Honorable, yeah,
to talk about how people should be
corruption is
retained
corruption.
or fired. Yeah.
That was a very,
Mm.
unprecedented and a high level of incompetence for that
Mm.
to have happened. Okay,
Mm.
there's something else we need to discuss here. In the interest of time, we can't not talk about this.
Yeah.
When President Hichilema was in opposition,
Mm-hmm.
he was detained several times. He was persecuted, if you want. He couldn't be let through some airports. And one of the things that people were really looking forward to this government is not to repeat or do things that have happened over years throughout all the presidents that we've had.
Yes.
This situation of detaining opposition leaders is sort of not going very well with the citizens and the people. I'll tell you that around the world, even us in the diaspora, we are not impressed with that. President Lungu made a statement a few weeks or days ago, and it was blown out of proportion. Wasn't he just speaking as a citizen or as a politician? Politicians say things, Honorable Chonya, when they are in opposition. President Hichilema made the same statement that Mr. Lungu made. Let's listen to this. Let's listen to this.
MP na officials bandi bampela mashina balemba mashina lonse. Number 1 police ni Kampyongo, number 2 ni DC nabaiche bali posa amabwe ndepo ya list. After 11 August tukabombera.
So after 11th August tukabombera. So detention of opposition political leaders, isn't that something that shouldn't have happened in this government?
Okay. So you were talking about the statement of the former president being blown out of proportion.
Yes. He's a politician. Politicians make statements.
And my question was going to be by who? By who? I'm sure it's by people on social media.
No. The minister of, what's his name? Your minister, the minister made a statement and said that statement from former President Edgar Lungu was not going to be tolerated. I should have probably played that clip here. He made that statement. He even quoted a section of the law in the Constitution threatening Mr. Lungu.
Okay.
Politicians make statements just like Mr. Akainde Hichilema, when he was in opposition, made that statement.
Yes. Okay, but back to your question, what is happening? What happened after 2011? And you referred to the detention of political leaders.
Yes.
Personally, I really think that when President Hichilema took up the presidency of this country, his posture was that of, reconciliation,
yes,
nation building, and also trying to have the peace, prevail. And I think those remain the pillars, of this new Dawn government, the peace and stability, of course, which create an environment for whatever developmental agenda now we would want to push. Because without those, we cannot achieve development. And for me, for him to have laid out, those as building blocks, and extending, an olive branch to everybody and say, let's work together. Let's bring all the 9 provinces, into our cabinet in a quest to, jail ourselves as a united nation. For me, that was a major step and position that the president took. And I was talking about how I appreciate, his sincerity in doing things.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, what you also see along the way is that, people seemed to have started to take advantage of his magnanimity, so to say, around these issues, daring, if you like, the presidency and the government, and deliberately, just trying to be offensive,
So detain them?
No. I think the issue now was about the issue becomes about letting the rule of law maybe take its course. The issue becomes about making people become accountable, for their own actions. You've heard also the president, sound strong warning, even to us who are his followers, to say, look, if you commit a crime, you are on your own. Do you understand? Because he wants, he will now leave it to the law at that point to take its course. I mean, as a president, he can give direction, but there are other wings that are responsible now for applying the law, for dealing with people that break the law. It will not be up to the president, and it is not up to him to say, law enforcement agency, go after that one. I think those people have their own job to do. When they see that a breach has happened, somewhere, it should trigger them to just operate within the confines of their own mandate. And it is not up to the president, to issue orders from where he sits as to who should be pursued for what. He is, like we said, is to give general policy direction. When he says there shall be no corruption, it is not him who should say, can you pursue that one for corruption? The responsible institution on its own should be motivated, to try and, fulfill, the aspirations, which are not only for the president, for that matter, it's for all of us Zambians. One thing the New Dawn government is credited for, which you won't take away, at least until now, the same issue we are talking about, peace, the peace that we are enjoying, that we started to enjoy soon after the change, government. The reduction, if you like, in the levels of cadreism in doing certain, things. It's because, the direction had been set, the desire had been expressed by His Excellency, and we tried to do that. But with the passage of time, you see, I'm talking about people trying to take advantage of that goodwill. You have now, people, daring to do things that they should not necessarily, be doing. And I'm sure that it leaves the president also now to let, those that must do their job to do their job. But I agree with you that this job has to be done in a fair manner, without, any, deliberate thought to selectively, apply the justice,
You see, it becomes difficult for people. The way Zambian and African politics per se operate.
Yes.
Okay. It's generally perceived that when somebody, especially political leader, is detained, even I also believe that, even if not necessarily the instruction coming from the president, like we said about Masewat, Minister of Health, these things are happening under President Hichilema's watch. So he takes accountability. Now, the issue of Kadarism, Honorable Chonya, I'm sure you remember this. Do you remember Dr. Kaunda used to take pride in peace and stability in the country? Other countries were at war. Zambia has never been at war. You remember what we used to tell Dr. Kaunda, right? You remember what we tell him? We used to tell him, we are not going to eat peace and stability.
You see? Which
So
are irresponsible
I also want to say
statements.
to the UPND, we are not going to eat the absence of non-Kadarism. We appreciate there's no Kadarism, which other people argue is still there. Remember what we told Dr. Kaunda, Honorable Chonya, we are not going to eat peace and stability.
But you see, those are statements. Now, as I sit in the Pan-African Parliament, as you may be aware, and when we are listening to how countries that are at conflict, their experiences, I always reflect back on my country and cherish, the peace that we enjoy, and how irresponsible I then consider such statements as we can't eat peace. How ill-informed such statements are. Because in the absence of peace, you will not even have time to eat your nshima on the table, by the way, which you think you can eat in a war situation. You will not eat that nshima. You will not talk development in a country that has no peace. So let us not take, this peace for granted. And I'm glad that our forefathers from the time of Kaunda have preached, this peace, because in their wisdom, in their experience, they did see, what you can obtain when you have a peaceful environment, and actually what is at stake when anything was to happen, to this peace. And while you Zambians were talking like that, that you couldn't eat the peace that Kaunda was preaching, today when I move around the sub-region, everywhere we go, we are acknowledged, highly acknowledged, as Zambians, and respected for the role that our former president and even the current presidents continue to play in maintaining the peace. I wanted to emphasize this one.
That's important. We've run out of time. We need to do a part 2. I will bring you back.
So, but on Kadarism, before I lose that one completely, the importance of that one also, if I was to give you an example, Kadarism, where we had cadres, for instance, taking over bus stations, collecting all the income that should have been going into local authority coffers or government coffers, ending up in, you don't know how much monies have now been redirected from that to go into the coffers and contribute to resolving the different issues. And this, we learned also during one of our tours. We met Kitwe City Council and a few other local authorities attesting to the increased income and revenue that the councils have begun to receive, because that particular aspect of Kadarism was addressed.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. We appreciate you taking the time, and we shall end our conversation here for time's sake. Thank you, Honorable Chonya.
All right.
Zambia Blog Talk Radio.